ahead and call us to order, and whoever calls roll call, please call roll call.
Lon Fry, Michelle Peranto, Nina, I know she's not going to be here today, Ben Limmer, William Steele,
Bill Steele is here on the phone.
Kurt Scheivel, you're
I'm
here.
here.
Brad Miller, no, but Bob is here. Tom Phillips, Robert Lewis, and then we have our tag group, which would be Chris Margarin, Kurt and William are here. Heather Sobush, no. Paul Simmons, you're here. Ming Gao, Kenneth Russ, Don Shepard, Anthony Gagliano, Judette Dorsey, and Whit Blanton, but did you say you're
Rodney Chapman, yes.
He's Rodney today.
Yes.
All right.
Did anybody else come on after Mike Case? Okay, right now we do not have a quorum, is that correct?
That is correct.
So anything we do will be by consensus moving forward. Now it's open for the public comment section. Anybody wish to?
I do take that back. We do have 3 from the transit agencies.
So we have enough for the
We
transit
do have a
agencies?
quorum.
Okay. We have enough for the transit agencies, but not for the tag.
There's no one here.
Okay. Now it's time for public comment. Anybody who wishes to address the board will request to complete a comment card, and we limit it to 3 minutes. Please see staff prior to the meeting. Is there anybody here for public comment?
No, sir.
Hearing none, seeing none, we'll move on. Consent agenda item, approval of the September 10th, 2019 committee meeting minutes. I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
And in a second,
Second.
all in favor say aye. All opposed, same sign. And the ayes have it. It is approved. Moving forward, we're going to get a briefing from Bill on the TBARTA Envision 2013. I believe we're doing it on the technical memo number 3.
That's correct.
Will the microphone go over the phone, or will
gonna
you
ask
just
that.
need to speak up really, really loud?
It should work. It should work, yeah.
Bill and Ryan, can you hear me?
Is the green light on?
It is.
Bill, Ryan, Mike, Liz, can you hear me?
I can barely hear you, Bill.
Maybe I stand closer.
You stand closer into the.
This is working, you said?
Maybe if you just want to.
Yeah, it is. I'll stand over here next to you, Kurt.
Except over here. Shoot, grab a chair if you want to.
Yeah, why not?
All right, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear.
That's a lot better.
I'm
Loud and
going
clear.
to stand right next to the mic then. What we wanted to do is give you an update on where we are with Envision 2030. These are the things we want to cover today. First one being just reiterating the responsibilities or the expectations we have for this group. I'm going to spend more time talking about regional transit demand and then how we're going about putting together potential improvements for the Envision 2030. And then we'll talk briefly about the MetroQuest survey and where we are in schedule. Are we too far away?
Is it, shouldn't be, is it on?
Worked just a second ago.
Oh.
Are you aiming towards?
Okay, I think you all saw this before, but we wanted to reiterate it in terms of expectations. We're gonna probably have to do more through email because we're having trouble getting more attendance at these meetings, but bottom line is we're looking for technical input on the work that we do throughout Envision 2030. Right now, we're going to talk about Tech Memo 3 today. It talks a lot about the regional transit demand assessment and where we're headed in terms of an evaluation of alternatives to put in the regional TDP. So we're going to cover three components of that regional transit demand assessment. The most important one is that regional commuter market, and that's the regional focus for TBARTA. But we also looked at the discretionary transit market and a traditional transit market in each of the counties as well, because those are important for local and regional tie-ins to the regional transit network. So we'll talk about all 3 of these. So the first one, we did rely a lot on the regional transit feasibility plan. They did a lot of analysis and a lot of work. It's important for us to take advantage of that, so we focused on that. We also looked at the worker flows. This is something we had presented to this group in the past when we did the baseline conditions and the worker flows across county lines. And then we also just looked at traffic counts across county lines to see how much travel on a daily basis there are in terms of vehicle travel as a potential market for transit in the future. Okay, first one is the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan. And if you'll recall, that plan came up with the top 5 performing corridors. So that was also the base network that we started with when we're building the Regional Vision Network. These are the 5 corridors that came out of that. You know the Regional Rapid Transit is the one that connects Wesley Chapel to USF, to downtown, to West Shore, to Gateway, and then St. Pete. So, of course, that's part of that. Then you see the other ones on this map as well. But that's really the building block of the Regional Vision Network that came out of the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan. It shows there that nearly, 675,000 jobs are within a half a mile of this network. So it's really a key regional network for jobs in the entire region. Chris, can you just flip them for me?
Sure.
Okay.
Is that the right one?
That went backwards.
There
There we go. The second one, again, we talked about before, it's the county-to-county worker flows. So we have, on a daily basis, more than 270,000 residents actually commute to counties that they do not live in. So they're residents commuting to another county. Again, a good indicator of a potential longer-term commute trip that could be a market for regional services. This one I liked, we just decided to look at, is traffic counts that cross county lines within the 5-county region, not external to the region, but within the 5-county region. 1.2 million daily vehicle trips cross county lines in this region. And nearly 1 million of those trips are on major roads on which we would have transit services in the future. So just an indicating that if we got a share of that travel market right there, that we could see a significant market for transit. I also wanted to talk about the discretionary rider market. This is where we generally look at household densities and employment densities, and based on the literature that shows the various levels and thresholds of transit opportunity, we identify those within the area. You can see the circles that highlight the more densely populated areas and the more dense employment areas of the 5-county region as well. So those are used as a basis for demand as well. And then the traditional rider market, and that's the demographics that are historically conducive to transit use, which are listed on the slide: the youth, the older adults, the lower income, those without a vehicle. Those are the markets also we wanted to identify for opportunities as well. You can see those circled on the map as well, where we see higher concentrations of those demographics, and those include some areas in Pasco and Hernando as well. So where we are, we have some basic demand information that we can apply. We really are relying on so much work that's already been done for potential alternatives and potential improvements that are out there to be looked at in the Envision 2030 time horizon. And this just shows that we looked at the individual transit development plans, we looked at the regional transit feasibility plan, the MPO long-range transportation plans, the transit elements, and have used all of that to work on a regional transit vision network that we're sharing with you in this draft today. And we'll continue to use other information, the work we're doing, the technical assessment, the public outreach that we're doing, all of that's going to come into the evaluation criteria that we're going to suggest to you today as well. So briefly on the improvements, we'll start with the short term. What we largely thought about in short-term improvements was making increases in the level of service on the service that's out there today that's part of that regional vision network. So it's improving the frequency, it's adding service hours or service span, it's adding some weekend service potentially, and also we looked at, and we've been discussing TBARTA's role in providing regional TD services, or at least having that in the plan for the future. So these maps are the maps we used in the MetroQuest survey. If you've taken that survey that TBARTA is operating now. If you haven't, please do so, and if you haven't seen it, we will send it out again to all of you. And I'll talk more about that in a minute, but this one just shows the opportunities for more frequent service on the network that we have today. And the next one is for expanding service hours, later evening, earlier morning on weekdays. And then finally, the opportunities for either adding weekend service or introducing weekend service on some of these routes that don't have any weekend service today. Then you switch over to the long-term vision. This is really the new service that we don't have today. It's express bus routes that cross county lines generally. It's the regional premium transit service, like the regional rapid transit, that TBARTA is evaluating now. Technology improvements, the fare systems that are being looked at now, any technology that would bring the region more closely together in terms of seamless service connections. These are the new express bus routes that we have in the Vision network so far. Again, this is largely based on previous work that's been done, as well as comments from each of the individual transit operators. In fact, I did get information from WID on the Pinellas plan to try to make sure we're consistent with what you all were showing for regional express bus in Pinellas County as well. Okay. And then the new premium transit services. These are opportunities beyond the regional rapid transit that's there, that future premium services that could be provided as well. And then here's the draft regional transit vision network. And I emphasize draft because this is still early. The board hasn't blessed this or anything yet, but all of the maps that I just showed are aggregated into this regional transit vision network that we're reviewing as we go along, and we're tweaking as appropriate. We had a meeting this morning with City of Tampa that we're probably going to make a tweak to the streetcar, for example. So we're continuing to improve this as we go along, and it will be hopefully final in early next year when we start finalizing the report itself. So we have that vision network to start with. We're going through a process now to basically identify and prioritize projects that if funding were to become available, what's the order in which projects should be funded? And that's what we're working on now. We're going through this analysis where we have the draft regional vision now, and we're putting together the evaluation process, which I'll introduce to you today, and it's in that Tech Memo 3 as a starting point, and ultimately ranking those projects for the future. So these are the proposed categories of evaluation criteria. Certainly open to suggestions and comments on how we use these. These are just the high-level summary of them. We still need to make some assumptions on how we apply them, but you can see that the demand measures that we just went through are the first three, and spinning off with measures of effectiveness that we can then apply to alternatives. We have the public input through the MetroQuest survey. We have some connectivity measures there as well. By that we mean a given project would connect to another regionally significant route or connect to a local service, giving credit for connections. And the more connections you have, in fact, we're probably going to normalize that by number of connections, normalized by the length of the route or something like that, so that we have a normalized comparison. And then what's the final one there? I'm in trouble seeing it, Chris. Productivity, that's right. So we are using TBAS, the model to do our ridership projections, to give us a sense of future ridership on these so we can have a relative comparison as well, and then transition that to a cost per trip for a comparison as well based on that ridership. So these are what we're proposing. We're trying to keep it fairly simple so you don't get too many criteria where it just kind of waters down everything, but enough where we can get a sense of both productivity and demand, as well as public input and connectivity. So, we have the ongoing MetroQuest survey. This is proving to do quite well. Staff's doing a great job of getting the word out and publicizing and marketing the survey. This says, what, 870 some now, but as of yesterday, I think we were around 1,000. So we're happy that this is going to be open for another 6 weeks or so, 7 weeks or so. So I expect we're going to get a good number of responses. We did offer an incentive. We're giving some lightning tickets away, so maybe that's helping our response. I don't know. That was a great suggestion, and so hopefully we'll get well into maybe we'll get closer to 1,500, 1,600, but maybe more. But that's going to be one of the evaluation criterion is to use the results of their response to the types of improvements that they like to see, and we're going to actually use that as a criterion into the evaluation process. So here's where we are with schedule. You can see the thick red line, the vertical line, that's where we are today, basically when we began November. The big thing we've got coming up is the board workshop on Friday. Following their regular board meeting, they're going to have about a 2-hour workshop that we're going to spend a couple of hours with them talking about what the roles and responsibilities of TBARTA should be in the coming years. This is something that we've been focusing a lot of effort on, and is probably one of the most important things that this project is going to do, is set the future direction of what TBARTA's role is going to be. And for TBARTA to be successful, we need to have a more explicit understanding of what TBARTA's role is versus the other providers of transportation in the area. So that's the next steps. Again, I'll mention the board workshop, and then you can see the survey that's ongoing through January 3rd. We have the draft Tech Memo 3 on mobility needs out there today, and then staff is reviewing the Tech Memo 4, which is a situation appraisal of the operating environment for TBARTA, and really helping. This will also be guided by the board workshop on Friday as well, in terms of the approach to responding to the environment in which they operate today. So also working on goals and objectives, and then evaluating the improvements using the evaluation approach that we talked about earlier in the presentation. With that, looking for input. Any questions or comments? We would love to have them as we move forward to the next step.
The only one I got is on your county-to-county workflows. It's 214 on your tech memo. That's a very impactful slide.
Okay.
And I think that would actually give you more impact than this here.
The slide, the way we showed it?
The way we showed it, because if you look at Tech Memo 2-14, it's a very impactful map of how many people are going which way and where. Like how many people are traveling from Hernando all the way down to Pinellas and all the way down to Hillsborough. And it's got some nice arrows, and it's a really, I'm going to use that slide. I'm going to steal that slide. I'm going to use it for my presentations. And that might give you a little bit better impact than
The illustration of it.
the
Okay.
numbers, because that shows you where they're going and how each of these little things impact our areas and TBARTA as a whole. Because what we're looking at is 273 people plus are traveling every day to go somewhere.
To work.
To work.
Just to work.
And
That's why I like the traffic counts, because that even shows you the all trips. And how,
It's-
and it's much larger than I thought it would be before
And-
we accumulated it.
well, if you ever think it's not that large, go be on the corner of 41 and 54 at 7:30 or 7 o'clock, because that's where it counts. The other thing is just to where are we at with CSX on this? Because that's going to be a big factor in about Friday, as you were at the meetings the other day, because that is going to be part of this. Where are they at? Are you even going to address CSX?
The way we've addressed it to this point is that regional transit vision just shows all the railway corridors without indicating what's going to happen yet, because we don't know yet.
No one knows.
Right.
Other than they want to buy the
I'm
tracks.
sure that will come up in discussions on Friday. We've had discussions with various one-on-ones leading up to this. And I guess at the TMA meeting, they had this discussion as well. If
Yes.
you want to share that, David, but the understanding is they looked at voting to add both the CSX rail project and the TMA and the regional rapid transit project as potential regional priorities at their next meeting. I think they finalized it, but they agreed.
Well, I guess the thing with the CSX idea is it's not a project yet, and
That's-
FDOT kept making that point, is there's no project. So what they agreed to add was the ability for HART to negotiate with CSX.
There you go, yeah.
That's what's being added.
Well, that's all we know right now.
Is there anybody on the phone who has any questions for Bill?
Yeah, I got a few questions. This is Ryan. Bill, table 3.2, long-term service improvements.
Uh-huh.
We got a bunch of BRT projects. When you go in and cost these out to do the evaluation, what do we talk about? Are you just going to include service, or are you going to include capital costs as well? And if you do include capital costs, Is it full scale, all the bells and whistles, VRT, or, how is that, how are you gonna approach that and handle it?
All good questions. We haven't made the decision on how we're gonna do that yet. The first step, I think, is we take the Vision Network and we probably reduce it down somewhat to what is more reflective of the next 10 years. But still have that vision beyond it. So I'm not sure we're gonna do the detailed costing and analysis of everything in the vision, because I'm not sure it makes sense to do that. So I think for the ones we select to do more detailed analysis, we will do what you suggest, and we will explicitly identify our assumptions about what the BRT definition means. And we'll want to welcome your all's input as to what those assumptions are and make sure you're supportive of those assumptions.
Okay, that's good. That sounds good. I do have another question for you.
Sure.
The ridership forecast for the evaluation, you said we're going to be based on, they're going to come out of TBAS. When I look at table 4.1, which has the results of the forecast for the existing service, is this used in any way to prepare the forecast for the short-term and/or long-term improvements?
Say that again, Ryan?
Yeah, I'll tell you, okay, we got some baseline projections, ridership projections in table 4.1. Are those used, or are those going to be used to prepare the projections for all the projects that'll go into the evaluation?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, we're using that as the baseline, and we set that up to validate against existing conditions as a starting point. So yes, now the model's ready for us to add the projects or make the improvements to existing service to see how that impacts ridership. And as you know, we generally use TBAS as stronger for a relative comparison than the absolute number that it provides. But it should be a good tool for relative impact that a given improvement would have in terms of ridership.
Hey, remind me, Bill, because I don't remember, and I'm focusing on our route, the 203, the Skyway connection. We have a situation there where, ridership's low, but that's because, we don't operate that service during your traditional peak hour commuter hours. This is kind of a mid-morning, and then an early afternoon operation. So in fact, if we were to operate that in the AM peak and then in the PM peak, ridership numbers would be much better. So, and I don't recall if TBAS makes an accommodation for time of day, but a question to you.
Yeah, I think we should be able to show the impact of that actual improvement to be a commuter-oriented service. Yes. So we should see a much bigger number once we put it in as a commuter service in the peak hours.
Okay. Just keep that in your back pocket or in mind as you if you guys go through the evaluation.
Sure, that makes sense. Sure.
I did have a question on the same table, 4-1. TBAS is showing almost 1 million people increase on one bus route.
Which route
That would be
is
the Hart 400 Metro Rapid. It seems kind of a lot.
I'd have to go back and look at that one specifically.
That's what I'm saying. It's like 922,000 people. All the other ones look, there's a couple that are up there.
That is their highest ridership routes.
Yeah,
That
well, it's
doesn't
like-
surprise me, but
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
That might be with the trends across the nation, we're going down. This region is actually bucking that trend across all three of
starting to
them.
switch over, yeah.
Yeah,
What's
we're
the
all
timeframe on
For 10 years.
10 years.
it? I can see that.
I think so.
I mean, with their new funding and all of the additional services they're offering, Metro Rapid.
Oh, we're just like, that's 1 million riders. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. But with the region, though, we're the one region, I think, that is bucking the trend across the nation, that our fixed route is growing, not shrinking.
Any others?
Any other questions?
Hey, I got one more. This is Ryan, Bill. I'm sorry, I got a ton of questions here today. On long term, we got transit technology. There's really nothing specific in there. Is the intent just for this memo to just leave those just on a high level?
It's definitely more of a high level, but it pointed out as policy opportunities for the future.
Okay.
I don't think.
Because again, I think.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Bill. Go ahead. You finished.
Yeah, I just didn't, we're probably not in a position to get in details on technology implementation, but we can have some policy recommendations for the board to consider.
Okay, okay.
I don't know if that completely answers it, but when we get to that, then we certainly would be able to review those as well.
Well, we talk about, creating, better connection between agencies, and we've pitched, a seamless method of making fair payments to yourself, and I think to some others there that are sitting at the table, and perhaps that's something that we may want to include here, in this plan.
We can certainly document the Flamingo effort and what you guys are doing down there in the plan, so you can see what's going on in the region today.
And again, it could be characterized as a pilot to see if it works. It doesn't have to go into this full, project launch. As a pilot, we can do these things more easily and see if they work or not.
Sure. Well, yeah, I remember I set it up on my phone when we were meeting with you guys, with what you're doing down there. So we can certainly include that in the report as well. Paul?
Is Ryan done?
Is Ryan done?
I just had a question on how you, when you're drafting and doing your research on all this, how you consider traffic mitigation in all of this.
Well, generally, the corridors that we're looking at for having the biggest potential for transit ridership are the same corridors that are the most congested. So I do think that they kind of go hand in hand. We probably haven't said that explicitly, but I think that would, if we showed the congestion map, you would see the same corridors pop up. That's what's so important about the regional rapid transit and other studies that have exclusive lanes or bus on shoulders, so that we're bypassing that congestion and making it more competitive.
Just our secretary in District 1 is, he has us doing a lot of, looking at a lot of different ways through transit that we can reduce congestion.
Okay.
Maybe not so, you said they go hand in hand, and they do, I suppose. But as far as coming up with pilot projects and things along those lines, that's what we're focusing on.
Well, and I think that's what the Transit Corridor Funding Program is supposed to be all about, right? Is really congested corridors to provide another option on that corridor.
Right. There's just not enough
Not
money
enough
in it.
money to do that, yeah.
Right.
We wish we had more.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
We'll be back.
We'll move on to Brian, which is Regional Rapid Transit PD&E Project Update.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Brian Bassar with TBARTA staff. I think it
Was it working?
Yeah. Well, it was.
It's hit or miss.
It was me.
It's you.
It's reflecting off
All
your
right,
view.
I guess I will, yeah, keep back. Yeah, okay. You can leave it there.
I didn't
that's
do
fine.
that.
I'm Brian Bassar with TBARTA staff. I'm the staff project manager for the PD&E study for the Regional Rapid Transit. Just going to kind of give you an update on where we are. So the project has 5 milestones, and we have arrived at milestone 1. In October, we went to our board with an information item letting them know that we were refining the number of station areas from the original 21 that was identified in the RTFP down to about 12 or 13. This Friday, we're going back to the board with an action item because we're going to be seeking their approval of the 5 alternatives that we want to carry forward in the 10% design. Next slide. We've done quite a bit of outreach already. We've had 2 meetings so far with what we're calling our Station Areas Working Group. These are land use planners from the 3 counties, as well as the cities of Tampa and St. Petersburg. We've had 1 meeting of our Business Partners Working Group. It was pretty successful. We had about, I think, over 40 people attend that meeting. We've been coordinating regularly with FDOT and their TB Next team. Last week, we presented to the TMA leadership group, and on top of all of that, we've been meeting one-on-one with county commissioners. Next slide. Before I get to the 5 alternatives that we want to carry forward at 10% design, I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we prioritize those station areas down from 21 down to about 12 or 13. I know some of you have probably seen these slides already. So the RTFP identified 21 station areas. We knew that that was too many. Some of those were included as placeholders. So we knew we were going to have to shrink that number down. Because once we nail down the number of station areas, then we can look at what type of stations they should be. Should they be on the interstate or off the interstate? And then once we know that, we can connect the dots on how we connect the stations. Next slide. So with freeway-based BRT, what we're shooting for is a station spacing of between 2 and 3 miles. Right now, with the 21 station areas, we're at about 1.3 miles between the stations, if you exclude the Howard Franklin Bridge and that conservation area north of Bears. So we need to get rid of some stations. Next slide. So we started out with 21. We identified 7 as must-have stations. Those 7 are the 5 planned intermodal centers at State Road 56, in the USF area, downtown Tampa, West Shore, and Carolina. And then also, on top of that, the 2 stations in downtown St. Petersburg at Tropicana Field and 4th Street, which is the end of the line. We removed 5 of the station areas based on initial conversations that we had with the Station Areas Working Group. That was 8th Street and St. Peter, downtown St. Pete, just because it was duplicative. We didn't need it if we were going to have Tropicana Field and 4th Street. We removed the station area in the Toy Town area because there's just not a whole lot going on right now in that area. Across the bridge, we removed Howard Armenia and North Boulevard, mostly for engineering reasons. We thought it would be kind of just difficult for the bus to get on and off the interstate in that location. And we removed Hillsborough Avenue because of issues related to historical preservation resources there. We thought it would complicate the NEPA process. Oh, let me back up a second. So that gets us to 9 stations left that we have to prioritize. All right, next slide. To figure out what the ideal number of stations was, WSP, our consultant, looked at those 9 stations according to 3 criteria. They looked at it using FTA criteria that will be used as part of the Capital Investment Grant Program. They looked at the increase in ridership we got with each additional station, and they also looked at a few other cost-benefit measures. Next slide. In this chart, in this slide, you see 3 charts. The chart in the upper left represents cost per trip. In order for a cost to be considered cost-effective in FTA's eyes, you have to be at least $10 per trip or less. So with just the 7 must-have stations, we're not there. In fact, the project does not become cost-effective until you get to about 12 stations. The chart in the upper right shows the increase in ridership you get with each additional station. So obviously, if you add more stations, you're going to catch more riders. But at what cost? That's the purpose of the chart on the bottom. The chart on the bottom represents the station cost per rider. So the chart in the upper left, that was calculated based on operational costs. The chart on the bottom is calculated based on capital cost. Now, ideally, what you want to see is a straight line, because what I mean is, as you're adding stations and the capital costs go up, that's going to be offset by the increase in riders. But what we're seeing here is that the station cost per rider goes up. It levels off at around 12, then it goes up again, and it levels off again at around 15. Putting all this information together, what that told us was that we think 12 stations is about the ideal number of stations that we want to shoot for. Next slide. So if 12's the magic number, we got to prioritize them. So for this party evaluation, WSP, they looked at those remaining stations, those remaining 9, and they looked at them in three broad categories. The physical, here I'm talking about like how easy is it to get to those stations on and off the interstate. They looked at performance, here I'm talking about things like ridership, VMT reduced, and then they also looked at the TOD, the transit-oriented development potential of each station area. Next slide. So remember, we had go back to our little math experiment. We had 21 stations, 7 were must-have. We took 5 out, that left 9 left over that we have to prioritize. What that means is if we want to hold the 12 stations total, okay, there's 12 total, we have 9 left over, there's only room for 5. Yeah, so the 7 must-haves plus 5 more. So we got to, out of those 9, basically we have to identify what were the top 5. Next slide. So this is how it pans out. When we looked at them, in those 3 categories, the top 5 were Himes, Fletcher, 22nd, Water/Bird, and Bears. We took this information back to the Station Areas Working Group to get their feedback, and based on their feedback, we made some adjustments to that list. There was general agreement on Himes. With Fletcher, we tossed that out because we figured we don't need both Fletcher and Bears, and the consensus was that Bears was the better option. So we tossed Fletcher and kept Bears. 22nd we tossed because the feedback we got from Pinellas County is they seem to prefer 62nd Avenue better. That location seemed to have better, more of a transit-dependent population than 22nd. So we switched 22nd out for 62nd. Waters and Bird, everyone agreed to. Bears we kept. We added State Road 54 because we felt Pasco County, they need to have more than one station. So we added State Road 54. We also...
I'll give you something else along there. Where that is at 54 is actually the clientele that will be riding it. That's where they would want to get on, not at 56. Because 56 is a different transit right than 54. And I even would change that to 54/overpass road when I get that one in there. There is, the complexes that are being built there right now are the ridership you're going to want to look for on this. So that's something to look at, but you can't base it off of future, it's got to be right this second.
And then we also added, we're going to add a station for the Seminole Heights, Tampa Heights area. We don't know exactly where that's going to be, maybe possibly Osborne. Next slide. So based on those adjustments we made, and this is what we took to the board last month, this is what we're going to move forward with, these 13 station areas. So going from north to south, State Road 54, State Road 56, Bears, USF area, Waters/Bird, something in the Tampa Seminole Heights area, downtown Tampa, Himes, West Shore, Carillon, 62nd, Tropicana, and 4th Street. Next slide. So now since those are the station areas, now I just want to talk briefly about the 5 alternatives that we're going to take to the board on Friday. Next slide. Before I do that, I need to kind of define some terms that you're going to see in the maps on the following slides. A bustle and shoulder. What I'm talking about here is this is a bus lane, but it would only be accessible to the buses when speeds in the general purpose lanes drop below 35 miles per hour. A BAT lane, business access or transit lane, that's a bus lane, but it does allow other users into the lane to turn into driveways for businesses or to turn at intersections. And then you got freeway dedicated BRT, which is, it's exactly what it says. It's a bus lane on the interstate, and the buses would have access to it all day long. For the purposes of the Capital Investment Grant Program, the second and the third one are considered fixed guideway by FTA. A bustle and shoulder, that is not considered fixed guideway by FTA. So you cannot include that in your percentage of the route when you go to apply. Next slide. So we're going to look at 5 alternatives, actually technically 6. The baseline or no build, we have to do, that's not considered 1 to 5, but we have to do it for NEPA purposes. What the baseline no build is, what it assumes is no station investment, and the bus would be operating where you see in the light blue, it would be in mixed traffic. In the orange would be the bustle and shoulders. Across the bridge, it would be in the express lanes, and in downtown St. Pete, that pink, that's the BAT lane. That puts you at 3% dedicated lane under that option. Next slide. So under the baseline we would not be eligible for the capital investment grant program under that one. Next slide. Alternative one is essentially a variation on the no build. The only the runway is exactly the same. No change to that. The only difference is there would be some slight investment in the stations. So basically it's a transportation system management option is what that is. Next slide. You can keep going. Alternative two, that's the Catalyst project. That's what was identified in the RTFP. So the segments that you see in purple, that is where the bus would be operating in a freeway BRT lane. Across the bridge, it would be in the express lanes, and in downtown St. Pete, the BAT lane. That puts us at 60% dedicated bus lane. Next slide. Alternative three builds on alternative two. The only difference with this is that segment north of Bears, that conservation area, we will look at making that a freeway BRT lane. That puts us at 80%. Next slide. Alternative four, instead of the area north of Bears, now we're going to look at the Howard Franklin Bridge as a dedicated bus lane. That puts us at 85%. Next slide. And then the final one, alternative five, pretty much 100% dedicated with the exception of that little part through the interchange in Tampa in light blue that you see there where it would be a mixed traffic. So those are the five alternatives that we went through.
For the percentage, what is FTA looking for percent dedicated?
Okay, for FTA, in order to be eligible for fixed guideway, because they back up. So you have new starts and small starts. New starts, it has to be fixed guideway transit. Under small starts, there's two categories. It can be fixed guideway or corridor based. For fixed guideway, it has to be more than 50% of the route has to be a dedicated bus lane. So basically, I think it's from alternative 3 through 5. We make it. Anything below alternative 3, we do not have it.
What would be the recommendation coming out of this? What alternative would the BARTA recommend?
I couldn't tell you that right now.
Staff recommendation.
Even staff. I mean, I'm not trying to be coy. I mean,
No, I understand.
I think it's safe to say that it would be cost prohibitive to do.
Yeah, great. I understand.
100% is the gold standard. This is what our friends say, like at the Tampa partnership we're pushing for, and so we're going to look at it. But could we do something that's slightly more than what came out of the RTFP? Possibly, but I won't know that until we look at the cost.
When will we look at the actual cost of all these alternatives? At the workshop?
Well, I mean, that's something that the WSP is going to start digging in. Once the board gives us the green light on these 5 alternatives, WSP will start doing 10% design on all of them, and that's going to take them through the spring. And so they'll be digging into those costs between now and spring. And we're also going to be, I don't have this in the slides, but the other thing we'll be doing between now and spring is we're going to start doing some design charrettes, going out to the public and kind of get some input from them on what do they want the stations to look like.
I mean, the thing I would look at is I'd want to get as much fixed guideways as I possibly can, and when you say as possibly can, as I can afford. So if I can go 90% is going to cost me this amount of money, but 100% is going to be, where does that number start to ramp up? That's going to be a thing I think they're going to want to know is where is that ramping up? Because you're going to bring this into these alternatives. These are all alternatives. Everyone would want 100%, but where does it become, as you said, you're correct, cost prohibitive? Because, I mean, building across the bridge over there, that's going to be expensive.
Yeah. Could you back up to, let's see, go back, that one. Okay, let's take this one for example.
Mhm.
Like, we don't have any stops planned in that area. So one argument would be like, well, you don't need freeway BRT in that segment because you're not stopping there anyway, and the bus will move fine through that segment today. But what I don't know is, but what about the future? What if, 10, 15 years down the road, we predict that congestion in that segment is going to be worse, that it would be worth the investment to make that a BRT lane?
When's the last time you've driven in traffic at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon?
Oh, it's been a long, I never drive up there. So.
Try it sometime. You're going 25, 30 miles an hour.
Okay.
I think it's gonna try it now.
But you understand what I'm saying? It is, the issue I'm
Yeah.
saying is that you're talking about that is not there, but honest truth, well, it's not all the way down to Bears, of course. It's once you get up closer to Pasco County and more traffic gets on there. but just looking at the traffic throughput, that is a very busy area. Even though they have, what, 5 lanes, or how many, I don't remember now, it's like 3 lanes across. It is still a busy area, even though it's freeway speeds.
I mean, the reason why I point that segment out is because I've heard Scott mention several times, like, well, we don't have any stops planned in that area. And in my head, I'm thinking, okay, well, that may be true. But even if you don't have stops planned in that area, you still gotta go through it.
Yeah, and that would be a key thing, and even still, I mean, throughout this whole thing, and this is gonna be a backbone for the future. If we're looking to go where we wanna go with it, I mean, the next step is gonna be 54 now, adding to that BRT level, and then you can tell me what PSDA is gonna wanna do more BRT, up and down 19 is connecting to that, and how about Manatee County? Maybe Manatee County might want to do a BRT from the south. I mean, I can see a lot of, this is the, catalyst project for a reason. How do we build onto that to make it all nice, get us a nice region? So, because, I don't know if anybody looked, but, I know Wallet Hub came out with the best transit agencies in the nation. Well, guess who was the bottom, 2 of the bottom 3? St. Pete was the 2nd worst, and Tampa Bay was the 3rd worst. So Indianapolis, of course, was the worst. I don't know if you've ever been to Indianapolis. They have some traffic. Not just transit, but they're also looking at traffic and other patterns too. So that's ammunition. Bill was laughing because I think he saw the same article.
Yeah, we have it in our presentation that we're making.
It's
for Envision 2030.
So-
I think it was in one of our newsletters that you sent out.
We've used traffic congestion in Tampa that bumped them below us.
Yeah, it's champion traffic. I'm not pointing, it's not us, because we're trying to solve the problem.
No, I know.
It's the traffic, and this is some there. I didn't mean to kind of derail your thing, but I was just curious of the cost, because that's the thing that's gonna come, the biggest thing, how much can we afford? And then we wanna build as much as we can afford. And coming with at least some idea of what that cost is going to be, i.e. how much versus cost, when do those two things cross at a point that you will say, okay, this is probably where we want to go? Because, I don't mean to sound bad, but the CSX is now back in the play of the game, and that's always going to have, well, if we spend 75 million on this or whatever it is, we're not going to have enough money to build CRX, and that's fun. I think this is the way to go. I mean, honest truth, I think a lot of people like that, but CSX is something. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's this.
No, I mean, that's the conclusion of my presentation.
Brian, you got a couple, comment and a question. So essentially what you're doing is you're taking the 5 alternatives to the board to get their blessing on moving that to the next phase. Does that look about right?
Yeah.
And then I guess the question is there a way for WSP to calculate travel time, given these different approaches to the BRT, so that way you can somehow quantify some benefit that goes beyond?
Yeah, as we move further along and we have a better idea of whether any given station is going to be online or offline, we'll have a better handle on what the travel time is now. Because right now, when they did their travel time analysis, they're just kind of assuming that all the stations are in line. And we know that's not going to happen, but that's just where we are right now. Once we have a better handle on, like, is this station going to be off the interstate, and this one will be on the interstate, then we can do a more accurate assessment of what the travel time would be from end to end.
Brian, can I add to that? The Tyndall Oliver's on the WSP team too, and our responsibility is to put together operating plans for each of these alternatives. So looking at inline and offline stations, and we'll have travel time for all of those options. So basically we'll have travel times for the 5 alternative, or 6, that is, plus for inline, and then if we assumed them offline, we'd also have that, so that we could have variations of online and offline stations too. So all that will be there.
Do you have a sense of how far offline you're going to project?
Well, I mean, each station
That's part of
area,
it.
it's a half mile. I want to say it's a half mile or one. I think it's 1 mile circle, a half mile radius.
Yes.
So anything within that bubble we could put a station. So, but we don't know exactly what.
But that's also the station working group
Yeah.
to help decide that.
I'll tell you, because at 56, in that half-mile bubble, there's a lot of commercial, high-end commercial that's not gonna do much except for, it's gonna be difficult to find some areas in there. And it's not gonna be cheap. Up to 56, 275 corridor. And that's gonna,
What I think it's gonna be, is if we're gonna have to strike a balance between designing stations that are pedestrian friendly, and that tends to be at street level, but we don't wanna damage the travel time. Really, ideally, the best travel time you get is staying on the interstate, but it's hard to make a station on the interstate look and feel pedestrian friendly. Where that balance is, that's something we're gonna have to figure out.
just recently come from San Francisco area. A lot of, especially in Livermore area, there's a lot of BART stations in the middle of the interstate. That might be, and there was a lot of people in that interstate. And that might be something to look at for the future, is how does BART do it? Because I was there on a Friday morning, and there must have been 100 people standing at that light rail line waiting to get on, all pedestrians, and there was no parking right around there that I could see. Then again, when you get to, they got the walls up a little bit, but that might be something to look at. I mean, copy and seal everything, see what other people are doing. Suggestion, I would probably put that FTA requirement, because you've reached it before on the alternative 1 and 2. You might want to put down that we have to reach a goal of this much dedicated lines.
Okay. I'll mention
So they know what the minimum is.
Yeah.
That would be important to them, because they may say, okay, go to alternate 2. We can't because of.
Got it, good point.
Thank you. Any questions from the phone? Anybody still on the phone?
I'm still on the phone.
Hey.
All right, Ryan.
Excellent, Ryan.
Still here. I'm
Okay.
still hanging in there.
No problems. Okay, next is our meeting calendar. Am I leading that discussion? I guess I am. Right now, I talked to some of the team, both Chris and Michael, about a week or so ago about what we're doing here at the TAG TMC. And one of the things I wanted to focus on, and I asked them to focus on, is what do we bring to the table? What are you looking from us? Because some of these presentations are great, but we also need to know, what do we need to act on? What's our action items that you're looking for us from? So you'll start seeing that more and more as we go through. And then we talked about how often do we want to do this. And currently, we went to a quarterly type of system. And if you have your chart there, we have one right now, is now, then March, May, June, September, and December. 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, okay, quarterly system. The only thing that I'm going to request is that we start looking at the travel home times on some of these things. Because if we can just start it like a half an hour earlier, that means a lot for us folks that are heading north and south to different travel locations. So I'm kind of moving that we move to a 1 o'clock show start instead of a 1:30 show. Unless there's no questions, we'll send out an email and make sure that everyone has can chime in and they don't have to make a decision right this second. But I'd really like to move to a 1 o'clock, because that means we get out of here half an hour earlier. And as you will know, traffic around here, that half an hour means the difference between 1,000 cars, I think, on the road at the same time as you are. So that would be the one recommendation I would have. Other than that, if you see our meeting, is there anybody have any questions or concerns about the meeting so far? September 8th, is that the weekend, is that the week of Labor Day, or is that the week after Labor Day? I don't remember what Labor Day is that next year. I'm gonna have to look here, second calendar, where's my calendar? Calendar.
7th is Labor Day.
Yeah, 7th is Labor Day. We may want to look at the September meeting, and do we want it on the 8th or not, even though today's meeting is after a holiday. Normally, though, if anybody, you're usually really busy right after a holiday, but it has to be before the meeting of that time. Hearing no question, any questions? Okay, moving on, discussion on, oh, we just did that, future TMC tag meetings. Does anybody have any topics or ideas to help improve or make our meetings more productive for us on how we're moving forward? Does anybody have any ideas? Bueller? Bueller?
But you had some.
Well, like I said, the biggest thing is I want to continue focusing on what we can do, or what are we supposed to be giving back to when we have these nice presentations. What do you need from us? And I want to continue to, as a chair, I'm going to continue to say, okay, what are you looking for from us when I see the agenda out in the future? What are you looking for? And then have that brief it right up front. We're looking at you to tell us what, make a recommendation to, and then go forward from there. So that way, we continue to focus on, and we keep on task, because we both have the tag and the TMC here, and moving forward from there. The other thing is I want to really encourage us to keep people coming into these meetings. Because as you can see right now, there's 4 of us here, and I know some people are on the phone, which is fantastic. I appreciate it, but like to also see your faces every so often at these meetings too. So I would encourage people to come as best they can. And hopefully we'll make the meetings productive enough that people will want to come and see value in coming to these meetings. I know David has a lot of good plans for TBARTA, and I think he wants our inputs on those plans to, if nothing else, to say, well, you didn't ask me about this, questions later. And I think we're going in the right direction with TBARTA, and I think everyone would like to be involved and help maybe shaping some of that discussion moving forward. So let's continue to encourage our partners in crime out there to come to these meetings, because we do want to make it productive but well attended. And if I can encourage TBARTA to call folks that are not here today or something like that to say, hey, look, we'd like to have you at the meetings, this is what we're discussing, we want your inputs, we value your inputs, and move forward on that. I think that could help drive up membership. And then once they're here, have a really productive meeting and not just be, whatever, give some good inputs is what I'm looking for. Not that they're saying they're not now, but just how can we improve it. Future meeting subjects, they're going to be talking about the feasibility study on Hyperloop air taxis, air gondolas, and various other things. Did you want to go over some ideas that you're looking at, David, or pass it off to Chris and put him on the spot?
Unless you guys have any specific questions.
Does anybody on the phone have anything that they would like to hear about that TBARTA might be doing? Hearing none, seeing none, moving on. Anybody on the phone? We'll start with the phone for committee member updates. Bill, do you want to talk anything about Manatee?
Well, Bill stepped away from the meeting, so it's just me.
Go for it.
Well, we've got a number of things going on. What do I touch on? I guess I'll touch on one thing that affects everybody. We've got a regional rodeo that we've got scheduled in March. I think it's March 8th or 9th, and we've actually got some thoughts on how to make that a lot broader and more interesting, draw a lot more interest and competitors. So stay tuned to a few things that we've got under discussion here amongst staff, and we'll share that with the department heads here, the folks at the table, in the coming months. So that's all I got.
Okay. Michael Case, you have anything you want to say, or? Who else is on there? Elizabeth.
No, sir, nothing to add.
Okay. Elizabeth, do you have anything you would like to add, or we leave it up to your boss?
Colleague.
You there?
May not be.
You may not be there. Paul, do you want to say anything about what your team's doing?
Well, I don't really have anything to report today. Today at our district, District 1, we had a regional training with Cutter and for drug and alcohol. So everybody in our district and District 5 and District 7 was invited to that. So I attended that this morning. And Cutter staff they give excellent training in that. attendance to that was very good. And I think it has a lot to do with our triennial reviews that we've been doing here in the last year or so. So drug and alcohol is a big portion of it. That's all I got. Thank you.
Rodney, anything you want to do for
Yeah, a
TBARTA?
couple of updates. As we were talking about earlier, Whit's not here because this afternoon is the discussion with the Board of County Commissioners on the transportation investment strategy, which includes perhaps a new funding source for transit. So we'll
I can
see
how that's important.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. And we're hopeful that the commission will continue to move forward with perhaps a referendum for the Pinellas voters in November of 2020. We also are working with PSTA, City of St. Pete Beach, and South Pasadena on a TOD strategic plan for the Central Avenue BRT corridor. So essentially the plan is being crafted to develop a land use vision that will complement the transit investment. And so we're excited about that effort and having the cities come along with us in the planning effort.
Sounds like fun. David, do you want to, anything on top? No?
No, just, I mean, you mentioned the Innovative Transit Technology Project, and Brian is leading that as well. We had a kickoff meeting last Friday
Yep.
to get that going with WSP, and we're looking forward to putting that report together and presenting that to TBARTA's board as well.
I'm interested in the air taxis. That's going to be interesting. Bob, you got anything you want to?
Oh, we got all kinds of stuff.
All the time.
Ronnie covered the big one. And we have 20 new trolleys we just ordered last week. We are in a situation where I think we got 45 buses at once from Earmark back in 2005. So, yeah, I know. And the earmarks have gone away, so that's something that we've been battling. So it's good to see they're just going to be, what do they call them? Specialized trolleys. Regular diesel, standard diesel, but they are now low floor, a lot of the trolley interiors. That's another from my list. Metro Magazine got a nice little article about our Mobility on Demand program that we do with Lyft that was put in place to get same-day demand response out and to also lower the DART costs of the provider, because Lyft actually ends up being cheaper.
I got 4 questions about that already for us, already, so.
I don't know if I can answer all 4 of them, but it's kind of a neat idea. The BRT project that Ronnie mentioned, it's approaching 90% mighty quickly. Should be 3 weeks. About 3 weeks, we should have 90% design on that. We did talk about years ago in this committee. I don't think anybody's still on it. No, maybe Ryan probably is. We put in 3 routes up in Northern County that were flex routes. We use smaller buses, and they would flex 3/4 of a mile off the route if you called in up to 2 hours in advance. And we have actually unflexed them now as of last month, simply because we couldn't keep them on time enough. And we had so many, this was really rider-driven, we had so many complaints from the riders that they couldn't connect because we couldn't keep them on time. Because you'd think 3/4 of a mile is not a big deal, but some of those could take 20 minutes just for one flex. And because, so there, you know, the idea was worth a try, but the riders said otherwise, so we went away from that. And now we're starting to work on some stop consolidation throughout the system, because over the years, people ask for a stop, put it in, and there's some routes where even our advisory committee, rider advisory committee is saying, I go out to my stop and I look to 50 yards to my right and there's someone to stop there, 50 yards to my left, there's someone to stop there, so even they're behind it.
Anything else?
That's better.
Ryan, you said you had some?
I forgot to mention, in December, we're gonna do a number of workshops, public workshops related to the RRT. I can email the specifics out to the group, but let's see, December 5th, we'll be doing one in Wesley Chapel at Pasco Hander State College. Then, let's see, December 10th, we'll be doing one in the West Shore area, and December 11th, we'll be doing one here at PSTA. I'll send specifics out.
Okay. And then for PSBT, we have a lot of plans that have been going in place for a while. We're finishing up the COA RFP. PSBT has been using the same route since 2010 and earlier, and with all the growth that we've had hospitals close on some of our routes, and we're still going to that same spot. Well, that's not really serving our customers and our community properly, so we're really gonna go out and we're gonna do not just a records review, I think was the last one that was done back in 2010. We're actually going out and doing a full-up rider, surveys on the buses, butts in the seat, asking people, and doing a really good outreach program for that. And that's the thing I'm focusing on, because the outreach, your information is only good as what you get in. The more people we can reach, the more information we get, and hopefully get some good data going forward. So we'll be looking at that probably this next year. We are also right in the process of bidding out our paratransit scheduling software, our CAD, computer-aided dispatching, AVL software, and a ITS software for whole system. So we're working on that. They should be going out probably within, one's at legal, so whenever that gets out of legal, the other one's going into purchasing, so I'm hoping to see it by the beginning of the year. What else? I had another thing. Oh, speaking of training reviews, PSPT got their training review. If you haven't had one recently, I know last year's was one way, they've changed them again. So they're no longer grantee, they're now, the county is the one, for at least me, because I'm doing business as Pasco Public Transportation for Pasco County. So if you're county, they're now inspecting the county's aspects, not the system's aspects, which is a change. And oh, by the way, FTA has been slowly shrinking down the amount of chapters in that they inspect. Well, they decided to go bring it back forward. It used to be 27 back in before MAP 21. I think they went down to like 12. Now they're back up to 22. And they included things like 5307 program, 5310 program, 5311 program. Oh, they also have not released a triennial workbook yet. So I don't know where that's going. The questions are kind of interesting, and I don't know if they're state questions, because they're all one now, state and local is all one, the same thing. So just to kind of give people a heads up, they also broke out the drug and alcohol into 2 different categories. They also broke out ADA in 2 different categories. And the technical section, they broke out into 3 different chapters. So they're really splitting some things up, and I think in some ways it makes sense, in some ways it doesn't, because they're trying to make it across the nation, as opposed to saying, if you don't do this, it's now the whole chapter you don't have to do. So that's where we're heading down the road right now. We will be starting our Shady Hills route, though. The buses will be delivered by the end of April, and we'll be starting up a Shady Hills route, northern Pasco, down probably by June of this next year. Last chance for anybody if they have anything. Other than that, oh wait, Bill's got one.
I meant to mention earlier, with Envision 2030, we have a speakers bureau, so if any of you all have smaller groups that would like to have presentations about Envision 2030, we are looking for some opportunities to get more education and outreach with those presentations. And it'd be like a 10-15-minute presentation, and we'd also, if it's during the survey time, we would bring tablets and give them the opportunity to complete the survey as well.
So this is supposed to be over at, if you didn't catch that, Bill has a group that will go out and talk about the Envision 2030 plan to anybody who's looking for a 10 or 15-minute presentation. I think we're supposed to be done at 3, is that correct? So we're a little bit early. Unless I hear anything else, I'll consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you. They'll get you on the road. Yeah, that took much of that time, right?
Well, I'm a football.
This meeting is no longer being recorded.
I'm a football referee, and so it's the middle school championship game today, and I'm on the field today. So I've got to go to Springstead for the middle high school championship thing. Why they drive? Do you think traffic here is bad at 5 o'clock? We actually had to drive across North Orlando at 5 o'clock. Oh my goodness! We were on some road. I don't know what road it was. It came off right off the turnpike that's up there. And I kid you not, there is 5 lights that you can see, and they would sit there, and they're all red. So I'm seeing all this traffic out there, and then the one light would go green, and that traffic would actually break free. And the light would sit here, and this light would turn red.